Welcome to the Islamic Library Association. We are dedicated to showcasing Muslims' rich contributions to literature and society while advocating for accurate representation and equity in libraries. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here with us tonight. Today, we are with Jenna Bint Hakeem, who was born and raised in upstate New York. Having been cultivated by her parents, Jenna and her siblings were educated in a homeschooling environment and learning under respected teachers throughout their entire childhood. Jenna says that those experiences positively affected her and believes that it certainly opened her creativity. She enjoys writing, drawing, sewing, crocheting, and especially reading. Today, she has also earned certificates in Tajweed and Quran studies. With such a dynamic background, we are here today to hear from Jenna and learn how she has personally contributed to the literary landscape in representing Muslims. Thank you so much for being with us today, Jenna. How are you?
Alhamdulillah, Jazakallahu khair for having me. It's really an honor. I really appreciate everything that you and your organization does for especially the Muslim community. And it's just really needed. And I'm really honored to be a part of something like this, mashallah.
Well, thank you so much. I've done a little quick bio. Are you able to tell us a little bit more about you for the viewers to get to know you a little bit better?
Well, sure. So Alhamdulillah, I am 21 years old. I pretty much just my parents are students of knowledges, alhamdulillah, especially in Quranic studies and hadith and things like that, things of that nature, and Arabic as well. And so they were really serious about us children, of course, learning those things and being cultivated in that way, alhamdulillah. And so pretty much I was raised in that way, seeking knowledge. But also I was very imaginative a lot of times. Like I would see a movie and I wouldn't just see the movie and enjoy the movie. I would be thinking about the characters and kind of thinking about the themes and, what can you learn from this, or what is the deeper meaning behind that. And so I've always been that way. And especially with reading, my mother used to take me to the library all the time, alhamdulillah. And so I was that way even with books, where I was always, really analyzing a lot of the things that I read. And so I grew up in that sort of mindset, alhamdulillah. And, now I am pretty, laid back after high school and things like that. And, but I do help with, subhanAllah, sometimes teaching classes with my mother, who runs an online Islamic school. And so that really sparked the origin of this book, actually. It that I wrote, Muslima Mukallaf. But alhamdulillah, it really sparked from a class that I started in order to educate the girls about the subject of puberty, growing up in Islam, and things like that. And so eventually it became a book. And I would say, as for me, I saw like, okay, my mother, she said, I need a subject. I need something that you can do, for the children. What do you think that you can teach them? And I really thought about it, and I said, you know what, this is something that this age group, it was a class between, I would say, maybe 8 to 15. And I said, I think that this is a subject they would really like. And so from there, it just became its own sort of thing. But I've always been writing, even in fictional genres. But alhamdulillah, the first thing that came first was this book, alhamdulillah. So alhamdulillah, I really appreciate that.
So technically, it's nonfiction, correct?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So, so technically, your book would fall under like a nonfiction YA.
Yes.
Okay, well, young adult, a nonfiction young adult. So you're saying it's primarily written for the age group of like preteens and teen girls, primarily talking about puberty, and so all young ladies, that's what it is.
Yes. Yes.
But
Yes.
in Islam, it's more guidelines on how to deal with it, things that are different during
Yes.
those days and things like that. So um,
Yes.
it's
I
just
would
very
definitely say it's oh, sorry about that.
Go ahead. So it was about your
I,
book.
I would definitely say it's a heightened experience in Islam. Like, puberty is already hard for no matter who's going through it.
Hmm.
But Islamically, I think we have a lot of like you said, more guidelines, and puberty is a time where you have to embrace them, and so that's why it's definitely a bigger, I would say, a much more heightened experience for Muslims.
So, what was your intention or inspiration around writing this book specifically?
For writing this book specifically, as I said before, my mother, she does run an online Islamic school, but before then, she had an Islamic school program, and it was on the weekends, and we were teaching things like Quran, Islamic studies, things like that. Um, and there was a group of girls who came, and you know, they I could tell they needed help in the maybe the hygienic areas, or they would be struggling with maybe Islamic obligations that they had, and it didn't come as easy for them.
Hmm.
And so I knew that, okay, I've been given this group of students, so I felt that, let me pause the regular curriculum that we're learning right now, and let me try to press on this, which I think is really, because it affects your life. If you are having problems with hygiene or even your Islam, like that internal conflict that you're going through, it really, um, it's something that people really go through, and it's a deep experience. And I think just because they're children or just because they're preteens, it doesn't mean that we should overlook that and think, okay, well, they'll go through it, but whatever. And so when I started, kind of, it was a very, very like bare bones sort of program compared to what I would later do.
Hmm.
But even just in that, where it was basic hygiene, I saw how the girls really lit up. Like, there were things that I would think, okay, well, everybody knows this, but when they heard about it or learned about it, you could see, like, they were like, oh, that's what I'm supposed to be doing, or
Yeah.
this is how I was supposed to do, or that's why that hasn't been working for me.
Yes.
And every week I would see them come in, and they would improve little by little on these things. And
Hmm.
so I just saw from there, I was like, wow, this is something that it really hasn't been tapped into Islamically, because although I think hygiene is universal, and, but the way that Islam, like the self-esteem, how do you lift someone's self-esteem, or how do you give someone advice through this time of their life, but through an Islamic perspective, in a way that benefits you spiritually. And so when I saw that, just how much it's like, where else would they be getting that from? Of course, if your parents know, the route to doing it, then they will give it to you. And I think most parents, they want to do it, but maybe they don't know the route that they should take. Or maybe
Hmm.
they assume, well, my girl is young, she doesn't even know about that stuff, but they often do. And they'll find out through sources that may not be reliable, may not be correct, or maybe it's teaching you things that maybe your children are being overexposed to something that really is inappropriate for them. And how do you talk them through that and expose them to things in the right way, in a way that is not damaging, and in a way that uplifts them instead of kind of scars them or something like this, right? And so basically that was the very first thread of how the book came about. I never thought of actually writing anything on it at the time. However, once again, a few years later, when my mother said, okay, what program can you put together for this group of children that I have, and I saw they were the same age group, I said, hey, let me just bring that program back, because I saw how much it was sort of unique. I'm sure people do it, but it was, I thought, it's not widely done, and these are the same age group. Let me do the same thing. But as I started outlining each lesson, it became bigger and bigger and bigger. Like, I would say, okay, let's do one on hygiene, let's do one on this, let's do one on that. But then I was like, okay, well, lessons about how to wash yourself, and then lessons about how to shave, or how to take care of yourself on your menses, what does Islam say about the woman on her menses, what is the etiquettes, what is the way that we should approach, all of a sudden, now I have to pray, now I have to fast, who is Allah, why do I have to worship him, all these things. It became so detailed, where I was like, okay, this is way bigger than I originally thought it was going to be. And then me, I'm a bit of a yapper. I don't really stay on subject as well as I wish. And so I was writing out these lessons like as if it was like a script. I was like, okay, and say this and say that. And I said, you know what? This could just be a book. And so I actually started writing it as a book, after a couple of lessons. And then that's pretty much how the book came about. It was actually a lesson plan.
Well, it was definitely a Allah's plan that you
Yes.
made that and got that through. You mentioned something about parents teaching their children,
Hmm.
and maybe some may not. Different people
Hmm.
have different relationships, different. Everybody's not the same. So I
Yeah.
think it's really good to acknowledge that. It may be quote unquote normal or whatever for maybe in your life, but it
Hmm.
might not be like that for everyone. And so
Right.
you're able to present the information that is needed. And again, not just as a young lady, but as a Muslim young lady. There's, like you said,
Right.
there's a lot that instantly, drastically changes. And
Right.
some young ladies are more prepared than others. And
Yes.
even I think the type of book that you have, even for young ladies who's, let's just say their mother or someone specifically, an auntie or someone talks to them about these things, I think it could even be better to still have that additional point of contact with your book. Not only that, just read it on their own, and it can even spark up other conversations if there's more questions afterwards. Or it can
Right.
also be used as a guide for a mother or auntie or anybody who know that they need this conversation, don't know how to do it.
Yes.
Your book is still kind of like a lesson plan
Yeah.
its own way, because it's teaching, it's informing, and it's very important for these things, again, to be in libraries and in public spaces because
Yes.
young Muslim ladies are in these spaces, and where else, you should have access to this information because,
Yes.
as we're saying, you know, all young ladies are going to go through this,
Right.
but it's additional when you're Muslim,
Right.
and these
And
things should be discussed.
yes. And I mean, I remember when I was that age, if I didn't know something, I would instantly just go online and watch those like big sis advice videos, or how to blow up video, type of videos. And, or you listen to like inspirational lectures on how to pray, why do you pray, all these types of things. Even though I got education from my mother, alhamdulillah, she was very open with me about things. But even if I was like, okay, I don't really want to ask her this, or, or I'm embarrassed about something, or I don't really, want to get into the nitty gritty, I'm like, okay, let me just Google it. Let me, look it up.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you know this too, as being a librarian. Alhamdulillah, I've actually been a library page since I was 15 years old. So almost, yeah, going on 7 years, I would say, either 7 or going on 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm being being in that position, I get very I would say I have I'm very familiar with the catalog that we have in our library. And if I were gonna go to a library and learn about these things, and just look up the public knowledge that is up there, I mean, I'm always seeing stuff like books that are saying like it's okay to be gay, or maybe sex conversations, and it's always looped in with the puberty conversation, and it's kind of like the big thing in those conversations instead of like all the other stuff that goes along with it. And not only is it, they have a different, non-Muslims, they have a different point of view
Mhm.
than we
That's
have about these things.
lifestyle.
And
Mhm.
so, but if a child sees, oh, they're way more explanatory on this than I'm getting anywhere else, then they're going to gravitate towards that type of literature, which
Mhm.
is very like openly pushed, because that's all that they can see that's so accessible, right? And so, I think any information on the subject is definitely needed. I'm not knocking those things, but it's just that we have to make sure that we have our own information on it being pushed and easily available for these
Yes,
girls.
accessible. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And that's I'm happy that you made that point because like you
Mm-hmm.
said, there are other books that are available. So it's not about
Mm-hmm.
removing other books or other
No.
types of literature. It's about
Mm-mm.
including
Right.
literature that represents Muslims, Islam, our way of life, things like
Mm-hmm.
that. And it's
Mm-hmm.
not only for Muslims. Like you said,
Mm-hmm.
but anyone can read it. Maybe
Yeah.
someone else wants to know. It could be another
Right.
little girl like, oh, this is new to me. She might
Mm-hmm.
have a Muslim girl in her class. Like, is it different for
Right.
her? You know, um,
Right.
it, it, it the literature, that's the point, to represent everyone. And libraries,
Right.
I have a lot of claims of equity.
Mm-hmm.
And the book that you currently have is a prime example of why these things should be included.
Mm-hmm.
It's very important across the board, not only for Muslims but non-Muslims as well.
Right.
But you said that this originally started with you making lesson plans with your mother, and
Mm-hmm.
that you were homeschooled. How do you
Mm-hmm.
think? How do you think being homeschooled and then assisting your mother in classes? How do you think that has shaped your experiences and perspectives and passions when it comes to your writing?
I think that it shaped it in a way where I was more able to analyze what I read and what I consume, because I've always been very, I would say I've always been more maybe imaginative or creative in that way, where I've always liked to draw, I like to sew, I like to crochet, I like to write, I like to, watch
Mhm.
movies, I like to read. And I've always been like, I really latch on to stories and things like that. But I think I was able to, because of my upbringing, I was able to do it in a way where I can really analyze it, and um, not just take things at face value. And so even now, when I continue to write, I always think, what problem can I solve with my writing? Or what can I represent in my writing that is not usually represented? How can I, if somebody were to super analyze my work, what would they get out of it? And so I think it really caused me to say, okay, these are things we all enjoy: reading, writing, watching stuff, and things like that. But how can I contribute to that in a way that's meaningful and not just, in order to consume, I would say.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
So, what themes do you hope that their readers take away from your book? Or, yes, because we already know that it'll resonate with young Muslim ladies. But how do you
Inshallah.
think it would? How would you hope for it to resonate with your readers either way, no matter if they're Muslim or not?
I think, well, what my intention is that it resonates in a way where, because I know a lot of Islamic literature sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes it can be done in a way where it's like textbookish,
Yeah.
or where people are like, okay, this is my religion, yes, but it feels a little robotic. And with my writing, I want people to see that Muslims, we're human. We have things that we go through just like everybody else.
Hmm.
How can Islam really uh, uplift my life and be a solution for my very human existence, instead of it being like, okay, I have to fit myself into this box. How does this add to my life? And that was really my intention as well with Muslima Mukallaf. My book is, I just wanted people to see, yes, you're going to go through this, you're going to go through that. This is what we're exposed to in the world. How can I include Islam in the conversation or in my life? But how does it add? Not how can I just fit into this, or not pushing things away, talk about it, put that on the table, and see that there are solutions that Allah gives us, and it's not for you to be restricted. It's to give you a solution for, because Allah knows us, He created us, and He gives us these solutions in the Quran and Sunnah. And that's why it was important to me to add a lot of hadith and Quran ayat in the book, because I just I didn't want to exclude that, because I wanted people to see, okay, straight from the text, these are the solutions that Allah gives us, but break it down in a relatable way, not like a, okay, I read this textbook, now what do I do? So alhamdulillah.
Yes, that's very good. I'm happy, that you've chosen to do that.
Alhamdulillah.
You're right about sometimes it is very, like you said, kind of robotic, very textbook. And
Mm-hmm.
to that point,
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes when I speak to people and talk about Islamic faith-based literature,
Mm-hmm.
they oftentimes it's automatically assumed that it's like adult nonfiction,
Mm-hmm.
borderline conversion material.
Right, that's true.
And it's like, no, there's all types of genres. Um,
Right.
you know, it's more of a lifestyle, and I have to explain that even a lot
Mm-hmm.
of books, let's say regular books, if you're going to
Mm-hmm.
the library, um, oftentimes it's a lifestyle more so than
Right.
any religion. And so I try to use that as the same concept. We have a lifestyle. It's not just a
Right.
religion, it's an entire lifestyle, every aspect of our lives from birth to death all the way
Mm-hmm.
through. Yes, it's a lifestyle, a way of living.
That's
And
true.
throughout that life there's guidelines, and that's what your
Right.
book is pointing out, that there are guidelines with this, against
Mm-hmm.
solutions.
Mm-hmm.
And again, yes, we are human. So I think to add that humanness in there, sometimes I just feel that that's not always seen or recognized when I'm talking to people about what not only what Islamic literature is, but what Islamic faith-based literature is not.
Right. Right. That's very
And
true.
so, yes, I think your book is just amazing. The
Alhamdulillah.
topic, it- it's a little weird to me for how much emphasis we have on ladies, young ladies, and reaching puberty and all that. Um, how it's still very textbook, like you're saying,
Mm-hmm.
opposed to more conversations, more open conversations. Allah has designed us to be this way, and He has given us the guidelines. So your book is great. But
Alhamdulillah.
what was the most surprising thing that you learned while starting your curriculum that you were writing that turned into a whole book?
I think something that stuck out to me while I was writing it was just, okay, once you start writing, you have to hold yourself into a certain standard, like where you have integrity about what you're writing. Because as I was writing, I didn't really expect that to come out, where I was just like, okay, well, whatever, I'm just writing this, But as I was writing it, I was like, okay, I'm telling these girls about these rules, this and that. And I'm like, you know what? Have I been following the same, everything that I'm putting in this book? Am I
Mhm,
making sure to hold myself up to these standards? Like, even in the mental health portion, like, okay, I'm giving advice on how to, deal with maybe anger, sadness, depression, anxiety. Okay, do I follow the same, am I following the same things, that same tips that I'm giving them, and just making sure that, okay, alhamdulillah, like, this is this is like, it's like a trust, you know, you're giving this information and you have to make sure that you live up to that in a way. You know, you have to make sure that you're being really trustworthy with the information that you're giving out, and do your research on everything and make sure that it's not something that you just Googled and then you put it in your book, you know. So it was a lot of that, just making sure to like make sure that I'm super being vigilant about where I'm getting this information from and things like that, which is why I kept it, I would say, pretty simplistic. Just, okay, Quran, Hadith, and then, of course, any secular knowledge. Make sure that it's, you know, approved and everything like that. Like, I don't want to just be like, okay, guys, if you eat this grass root, it will get rid of all of your cramps forever. And that's something I read from like a blog or, you know, or something like that. You know, I don't want it to be like an obscure or something, you know. I have
Yeah.
to make sure that, you know, and I don't want to, you know, super rely on just be like, drug yourself up with ibuprofen forever, you guys, you know, something like that, you know. So
Yeah.
it was just a bunch of making sure, okay, make sure you're being honest with everything, make sure you're living up to what you're putting out. And that was something I was surprised that I would kind of be thinking about
Mm-hmm.
while writing. Yeah.
So let's talk about how your book was published. Did you self-publish it, or how did you go about that?
Yes, I did self-publish. Actually, since I was very young, I've been writing since I was maybe 6 years old, just writing stories here and there. And especially, you know, I had gotten more serious about it as I got older. And I think I was like maybe 12, and I was like, I have to be an author. So I was like, how do I do that? How do you even publish a book? And so I would always look up videos on people's methods of how did they, you know, begin querying and, you know, get traditionally published. What is that process like? And then self-publishing, I think it had just maybe started to pick up, maybe not just then, because maybe if I was 12, that would have been like 2015 or something like that. So it wasn't just picking up or anything like that, but I would say it was becoming more popular. It was something that people were becoming more open about. You know, with you would see a lot more author channels pop up doing that, and so those are the channels I would watch, and I'd be like, I want to do that too. So it was really something where I said, okay, since I was younger, I said, you know, I know the process inside and out of self-publishing because that's what I've been watching since I was younger, and um, even with my mother, Alhamdulillah, Kyla Jenna, she has written multiple books as well, and she has done the self-publishing method. And so and I was definitely alongside her in that because I was so fascinated with it, you know. And so Alhamdulillah, I definitely take inspiration from my mother in
Oh,
that way as well.
alhamdulillah. Yes.
Alhamdulillah.
So being self-published, are your books in any, are they available in any public libraries?
Yes, they are a bit currently. I think they're in maybe two libraries so far, but I'm trying to get them, uh, you know, more spread out. But the thing
Yes.
is, you know, you have to make sure to contact the libraries and make sure that, you know, they're willing to accept either a donation or if they want to buy it on their own. And so yeah, they're in a couple of libraries now, and they are available for libraries to purchase, as well as bookstores. So I think more than two now, alhamdulillah. I think originally it was only two, but now, you know, it is more than two libraries. Maybe I would say maybe five. I'm not really sure. But it would definitely, especially because I worked in the libraries for so long. It was also, and being a lover of libraries, you know, my mother always took me to libraries and such. I definitely was like, hey, this is one of the first goals for my book. I was like, I definitely want to get it in libraries. So alhamdulillah, yes, it is.
Alhamdulillah. Yes, but that's part of you. You said they're in two, at least two libraries, maybe up to five.
Hmm.
Well, but I'm sure you've had to directly contact these libraries and do a lot of that.
Hmm.
And that's where the Islamic Library Association comes in, you know, to be able, so that you don't have to do all the legwork. Pretty much
Hmm.
where your book can be selected and included.
Alhamdulillah.
Because any other, I don't want to say any other author, but authors that are published through the top five publishing companies,
Hmm.
they They don't contact libraries.
Right, right.
They do not contact
Yeah.
libraries. And There's nothing wrong with being self-published at all.
Mhm, mhm.
But that's another thing that libraries are not openly, primarily not opening and seeking for. And
Right.
that's where all the diverse literature is.
Right.
Self-published and the much smaller publishing companies,
Right.
because there's even publishing companies that focus on Islamic literature.
Right.
But that's pretty much where the Islamic Library Association comes in, to be able to have a committee to focus on the concerns and needs of the Muslim communities, and that includes having proper representation, not just of it's not just include books with Muslims, but representation to show the diversity within Muslims, and because there's different cultures, but that's still
Yes.
separate from the religion, you know.
Right.
And right now, there's no requirement, there's no quota, there's no nothing. So you
Right.
have to. I mean, so are you going to go to all 9,000 libraries in America?
Right. You're right. Just calling them up. Oh, please.
Yeah.
Next one on the list.
Send you the book, and then send you the book, and then get you to
Right.
review it. Like
Right. Right.
that's not really feasible. So,
Right.
and even if you could do that, you shouldn't have to do that.
Right. Right.
So, that's kind of what we're here for, to assist in making sure your work is writing the book, and you've done that. So let's get into our,
Alhamdulillah.
you know.
Alhamdulillah.
So, what is your representation regarding, what is your perspective regarding uh, the representation or the lack thereof of Muslims in public places, Muslim representation in
Hmm.
public places, such as libraries that you love?
Right. Um, I think that it's kind of hard because I think with I'll speak only for America because that's where I was born and raised, but I will say that because we have a culture of like, they're pushing diversity in many different aspects now, I think it's a very good time to bring out Muslim literature and Muslim media in general. Alhamdulillah, I think now is a really great time to take advantage of that and do it from our own perspectives instead of like the perspective of people who they don't really know much about Islam. They kind of will go off of their stereotypes or their understanding of it or what they Googled in order to write a character about it, or, and they don't really, I think because Islam is such a detailed lifestyle, if
Mm-hmm.
you're on the outside, it's hard to capture all of that. You can't really, it's hard. So I think it's important that Muslims take advantage of the atmosphere we have now, and inshallah try to do their best in pushing their work, and alhamdulillah associations like yours really make that possible. But in general, I know that too it can be hard because once you start kind of showing up in these spaces, the people who sort of control these spaces, they want your representation to be in line with what they're okay with. And so like if you have a major conflicting view as a Muslim and you represent that, they're not going to help to push that, or they won't be okay with it being pushed. And I think it's a double-edged sword because you will get representation, but only to a point. And so I think it's important for Muslims to realize that keep true to yourself and your beliefs
Mm-hmm.
when you're trying to get pushed in these spaces. Don't bend for what you think that other people are expecting of you, and just be true to Islam and your beliefs, and you as a person, of course, what you want to represent in your own literature, and just in general, any media. And but also having Islamic organizations like your association, mashallah, it allows Muslims to have their own leg to stand on, where you're not relying on maybe non-Muslims or people who don't really have your best interests at heart to push your stuff. So Muslims also need their own organizations in order to push our the messages that we want to push out.
Exactly. I agree completely. Something that I say is that we have our own stories. We can tell them ourselves, and we are
Right.
telling. It's just about having them equitably
Right.
accessible.
Yes.
So
Yes.
there's and with you being in the library, I'm sure
Hmm.
just my question that I have asked several times in different settings as a manager. I sit, and I've been managers in different settings, different
Hmm.
libraries, and I always ask who is being excluded from your inclusion efforts.
I see. Wow.
Yeah, because there's a lot of
Mm,
talk about inclusion and equity and
right.
community and all of that. Um, yeah, I mean, I just think that's the simplest way. And oftentimes, there has been
Mm,
times when I've asked, well, how many of these books look like me? Just okay, we just now set 30 books on the shelf. How many of these books represent me in one way or another?
mm,
So, because it's one thing to say something, and
hmm.
another thing when you have a person sitting there, you're like, oh shoot, you know.
Yeah. Right. Right.
It's not a lot of us in those spaces. It's
Right.
not.
Right.
But I'm convinced that it's because people tend to go where they feel included.
Right. That's true. That's true.
Or welcomed, not misunderstood, or you're there only, you can tell when someone's stereotyping you for whatever reason it may be.
Right.
And libraries in America, at least, is very the culture. It's not new.
Yeah.
So there's racial concerns and religious concerns because again, uh, Islam intersects with a lot of other things, may it be race, culture, whatever.
Right.
So it's not just a one box, and sometimes it's interesting to navigate which which part of you bothers them the most.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to find. It's weird because you'll think, am I being friendly enough? Am I being, I don't know, is my scent, is it like what is it, because
Yeah.
I remember even my brother, he joined a football team and, a school football team, and he said, you know what, they had a problem with me because of my the oil, the oud.
It
And
yeah.
so it's like it's strange because you just never know what it is, or what do they assume of you, and how far are they just letting their assumptions take over versus who you are as a person, so it's definitely it's definitely hard, or because you have to cover, do they see you as professional or not, and so that can be something too. It's always something. It's always something.
Yeah, it is a lot, but again, that's where that literature comes in because it's a representation of everyone.
Right.
So it's not just Muslims to see themselves. That's part of it. It's a big part of it. But
Right.
also for non-Muslims to see us. We see them and their
Right.
literature, So, but yeah. So,
Yeah.
um, what do you hope your readers will love and learn from by the time they take away when they take from your book? Now, I know you've mentioned a lot of things, but
Mhm.
what do you if you can name one thing, just solid, what do you hope that'll be?
Hmm. Well, maybe this is this is small, but I do hope they love my drawing because actually I did
Okay.
illustrate the book, and I actually did work hard on a lot of these illustrations. SubhanAllah, let me try to. Okay, I did illustrate the whole thing, and I was like, you know
Wow.
what? There's a lot of things.
Alhamdulillah. Yes.
Yeah, alhamdulillah. So I'm not
Okay.
sure if you can see everything, but there was a lot of stuff where I said, you know what, I want it to be fun. And so I actually want people to enjoy the artwork as well. Alhamdulillah.
She said that. You didn't say that before. You didn't say you did the illustrations. And that's a very good reason to love a book. I
Alhamdulillah.
It's great.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, when I was a kid, I know I would read books over and over, not even because of the story. If I liked the pictures, I would just sit and look at the pictures. I remember my mom got me like a brushing your teeth book when I was little, and I just love watching that. I think it was like a dog character and he was brushing his teeth, and I would just sit up looking at the dog and be like, I want to brush my teeth even though I brushed it just a few minutes ago. I want to brush it
Yes.
again. So,
Yes. Yes.
I think that especially for when you're younger, I think visually you things stick with you because of the visual things that you the visual connection that you grew with it. And
Mhm.
so that's why I was like, I have to really throw it down on this on this drawing, right now, to make sure that's included, and hopefully people can connect to certain things and it'll make things easier for them to understand or to connect with.
Yes, that is amazing. Inshallah, they will.
Inshallah.
But what's next for you? Are you working on any new projects?
Yes, I am working on a few new projects, inshallah, but I do not want to reveal them. I
I
don't want to
understand. I
reveal
respect
them until,
that.
because what's funny is that sometimes I'll be working on something and I'm like, this is it. This is my next thing. And then a new shiny project will emerge where I'm like, oh, this is the next thing. And that is the next thing. So, oh my goodness, subhanAllah. So, but yeah, I definitely am working on multiple projects. We'll see which one gets pushed out first, but they're all some of them are in nonfiction, but I am also a fiction writer. So we'll see what comes what comes
Okay.
next, inshallah,
Make sure you let us know. Whatever it is, we definitely want to know. We definitely want to be a part of it. Um,
inshallah.
so do you have any suggestions or advice for any new or aspiring Muslim authors or even illustrators when it comes to specifically about Islamic faith-based literature?
I do have a general word of advice for both. I would say something I think is important is that because I know that now, especially with self-publishing, it's so much easier to publish. I would say it's not easier because it's a lot of work. It's like a really lot of work. And that's why people go to traditional published route, is because it's like, I'm a writer. I'm not signing up for all that other type of stuff that comes with it.
Yeah.
Right. And so either way, it's a lot of work no matter what. But I will say, because publishing is more accessible, I think it opens the door to people kind of not being as thorough in what they want to present. As in, for example, being like, okay, you know what, I'm Muslim, but I'll write this non-Muslim romance novel that maybe has smut in it or something like that, and I'll just publish it under a pen name or whatever.
Mm.
But you're not thinking, okay, think of sadaqa jariyah, think of when you die, this is what you're leaving behind. Think about, what are the deeds, what are your readers getting out of what you have written. Or even if you draw things, okay, don't just draw random stuff and be like, okay, well, this is what I have to present to the world. Okay, how does it weigh on your scale of deeds? Art is something that's very personal and things like that, so you don't want to police people's art. But at the same time, as a Muslim, you have to incorporate Islam and our beliefs and things like that into your art. Understand, how's your art going to affect you in the grave? How's your art going to affect you in the akhirah? And even now, okay, like some people write things that it does not uh, coincide with Islam, but they're doing it maybe just for fun or maybe for money. And okay, well, what if you blow up and get super famous off of that as a Muslim? What is that? Because you never know with art, and so it's like, make sure it's something that you're proud to represent. Make sure it's something that Allah will be pleased with you and accept as a piece of worship, because people don't realize, I think, that art, even art, something down to your own artistry or your ideas, that can be worship if you execute it in a way that coincides with the guidelines that Allah has given us, so.
Wow. So That's a really good point.
Alhamdulillah.
Like the pen names and things like that.
Hmm.
Yeah, those things happen. And
Yeah.
even when it comes to, even if they do keep their name, but like you said, didn't expect to get famous off of it or things like that, because
Hmm.
I know with you being in the public library, I'm
Hmm.
sure you've seen books that it seems to me that the books that are being allowed in
Hmm.
are not accurate representations of Islam.
Right.
Even if they're saying they're Muslim or in some
Yeah.
way, shape, form, or fashion, it's taken as a form of representation of Islam and
Right.
it's not accurate. And so
Right.
it seems as if at the moment, to me, and I'm only speaking for myself at this point, but I think
Hmm.
most Muslims would agree that
Hmm.
some of the literature, it's more of a question mark. Why isn't
Right.
accurate representation of Islam allowed in the libraries, but the diverse, true representation of Islam and Muslims are struggling?
Right.
Statistically, is less than 1%. So,
Right.
in a place that is claiming equity,
Hmm.
but I don't think that's a coincidence. That's my whole point. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah. So again, it goes back to that question of, who's being excluded from the um, inclusion efforts because,
Right. Right.
to add, yeah, I just don't think it's a coincidence, and we can just leave
Yeah.
it there.
No, I believe that. I believe that because a lot of times with representation, no matter how much people say they're pushing it, it has to coincide with what their agenda is. Okay?
Yes.
So if they see, oh, well, this form of representation that is not accurate, if that coincides with my message more, I'm going to push that over
Yes.
this one
Hmm.
that it's accurate, but it doesn't it goes against what I want this representation for.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. it's
Subhanallah.
it's one thing to write your book,
Hmm.
um, well, a Muslim to write, and because, like you said, you could be Muslim and not write an Islamic faith-based book,
Right.
or a book that represents Islamic lifestyle. So
Right.
when you do have that,
Hmm.
and you're in the library, it's one thing to only have your book, but with you
Hmm.
being in the library, you see that other side of
Yeah.
what I'm sometimes explaining. Like, no, 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 no. We know you have these good books, but
Right.
what is being pushed?
Right.
It,
Right.
it's
I mean,
very interesting.
I have I know of a book which I won't mention it and everything like that, but there was a book that I was super excited to read because on the cover it's like super Islamic representing, and I'm by the way, I hope you don't hear the bells in the back. I actually live close by to a church, so subhanallah. If you guys hear that, I'm sorry about it. I can't do anything
Okay,
about
I
it.
hear it, but it's fine.
Alhamdulillah. But yeah, so but yeah, and I was super excited to read it, and I'm like, okay, yeah. And but when I read it, the message of the book is literally to say, because it was about a girl who her mother was not Muslim, her father is Muslim, and she's saying, okay, you know what, I want to accept Islam, and this was her journey, into accepting Islam. And the overall point of the book in the end was to say, I'm going to start practicing Islam, but I'm going to leave off the stuff I don't agree with. And I said, oh, well, oh, yeah, can you? Sorry, my sisters are throwing down my charger. Um, oh, thanks. But yeah, but that was the whole point of the book. And I said, I don't know if that is something that I would be comfortable with putting out as an author, because that's me telling a whole group of girls, hey, if you're uncomfortable with something, if you don't understand it, or if it's not going along with what you want,
At the
choose,
moment,
right at the moment, you can leave off Islam in that perspective. Just do what you want to do. And I said, this is not something that I would I would replicate, or and that's not something that I want other Muslim girls to read, or I don't think that is productive. What does that give to our youth, you know?
yes. I'm happy you brought that up because I oftentimes talk about a book again. I won't say the name, the title of the
Mhm.
book, but same similar situation where a pretty hijabi girl in the front.
Hmm.
And it looks like it's a young adult, oh, pretty hijabby girl. And then, but when you read the book, it's about her whole boyfriend life. It's
Yeah. Yeah. I'm like, okay. And that's the thing, too. I think people try to, they try to put is like Muslim stories in the view of a Western. Like, I feel like if you're born and raised Muslim, or even if you have become Muslim, your life is not going to rely around, I want to have a boyfriend and this is how I want to do it. Most Muslim girls, of course, we have feelings too. We have crushes. We want to be with people. But the way that Muslims generally go about pursuing relationships is not, I'm struggling with my religion so hard for this man. Like, I don't know. Like, it's just not the way that happens. It's
not.
much more nuanced, and it's not about chasing a man,
That's
and
not
even
like,
if you like a guy, like the whole conversation is not
oh,
how do I get him and how do I skate around the rules and oh, look at his dreaminess. It's not about that. It's completely different, because if you believe in Islam yourself, you're like, okay, but I agree that it shouldn't be this way or that way.
right. Well, thank you so much for that. Could you let us know where everyone can find your work?
Well, you can find me at jennabinthakeem.com on my website. You can also find me on Instagram at jennabinthakeem on Instagram. And I think that's pretty much it. I'm actually not too many places. And also, I have a Pinterest as well, come to think of it. Alhamdulillah. And the Pinterest is the same, Jenna Bint Hakeem on Pinterest.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for all of your insights and telling us all about you and your work. We really appreciate it. And we look forward to seeing you soon and more work from you, inshallah.
Inshallah. And I really appreciate this opportunity. And it was really a huge honor. And alhamdulillah. So, jazakallah khair for having me on.
Alhamdulillah. All right. Thank you so much. I'll see you soon.
Okay, inshallah.
All right. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
Join the Islamic Library Association, and together we can shape a more inclusive future for literature.